Now, it was called the Battle of Newbury. The construction of the Newbury bypass sparked the biggest protest seen in the south for a generation. This week, to mark 20 years since building of the road began, we have a series of special reports reuniting some of those involved. Tonight, reporter Daniela Relf returns to the scene. Today, she's the BBC's royal correspondent. Back then, though, she was our Thames Valley reporter.
Listen to me, OK? You are being warned, OK?
Evictions from the trees were put on hold.
The trees were a very emotional issue.
It seems hard to imagine that the security guards will be caught by the same trick twice.
After months of clearance, protests and evictions.
What a day for eviction!
For a while, it was a daily struggle. The protesters in the trees and the climbers sent up to evict them. And if they weren't up high, they were underground, making their removal that bit trickier.
Have you achieved what you wanted to do with this today?
We'd like to have held on longer, but they came prepared today, so we're holding on as long as we can, really.
The protesters were determined and imaginative. It was the job of the Under-Sheriff, Nick Blandy, to evict them.
Some of the other European countries, I don't think would have been anything like as patient as we have been with these people, and in even less civilised countries in other parts of the world, they might have had the machine guns out.
And 20 years on, the sheriff was back in town.
I mean, for want of a better word, you became something of a hate figure for the protesters at the time, didn't you? Did that bother you?
I'm not sure. I think that's a bit of a strong word, actually.
OK.
I think they had a certain amount of robust contempt for me. I don't know if you remember, they had a big sound system rigged up in the trees and playing Bob Marley's I Shot the Sheriff at loud volumes, which I thought was terribly funny.
It was at times an eccentric protest fuelled by a real sense of camaraderie in the camps.
We had an extraordinary presence, the largest presence and protest ever seen in the anti-roads movement.
Still standing.
20 years on, we reunited Nick Blandy with Newbury protester Philip Pritchard.
Dead branches there, but...
How did you feel about us as protesters?
I was just saying that I had the most extraordinary respect for you because it was just so cold.
Yeah, at the time, we felt quite cross towards the Under-Sheriff of Berkshire, but I see, you know, you're a person, you were in a role, and I was just
enforcing the law.
You were doing your role.
You may be liable to arrest and prosecution for an offence contrary to section.
Several protesters are prevented from coming anywhere near the bypass route.
As a young reporter covering the protest in the trees here 20 years ago, it was a consuming experience. Although I was only ever an observer, Newbury did become a way of life for a while. The dawn starts, the intense feelings on all sides and the constant sense of conflict. It was a similar story for many of those involved here.
Listen to me, OK? You are being warned, OK?
The policing of the 9-mile route was a huge undertaking.
I think the trees were a very emotional issue, which we fully understand.
For the man in charge back then, getting it right was complex.
For its time, we coped with most of the tactics that the protesters had, but we also, I think, were pretty firm with the construction companies as well. I think they were taken a bit aback.
The Newbury bypass campaign left its mark. Here, the protesters became more inventive. The police grew more adept at challenging them. 20 years on, Newbury is a significant chapter in the road protest movement. Daniela Ralph, BBC South Today, Newbury.
Good to see you back. And tomorrow, Paul Clifton looks at what the protesters achieved and whether that had any impact on road building here in the south.